Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and a little slow on the miking up there, so thanks for vamping there, Eric. You know, one frankly annoying tendency in the digital world that we share with the ad industry in general is that when a disruptive force hits, far too much time is taken up talking about how disrupted everything is, and far too little on the nuts and bolts of how to deal with the disruption. The speed and power with which programmatic buying has taken over the industry almost guaranteed that we see that tendency in action, and then some. The frenzy over the advent of programmatic buying is why Programmania, with an exclamation point, is such a fitting title for today's immersion. Business Insider says that we are at a programmatic tipping point. For the first time this year, programmatic transactions will represent 52% of non-search digital ad spend. I imagine everyone in this room is wrestling every day with how to effectively execute in a programmatic marketplace. So we don't really need any more overheated views from 10,000 feet. We have to have practical advice on how to actually build a winning process for an automated buying ecosystem. So how do you sell? How do you price? How do you provide transparency? How do you restructure your organizations for automatic buying? What kinds of skill sets and talents are best suited to delivering effective programmatic sales? So we'll tackle these questions and more with our all-star panel of experts. We have Leslie Nadler. I guess you don't have to identify yourself. You're somehow the sole woman on the panel. Got that one. Executive Director and Head of Digital Sales at Conde Nast. And we have Paul Caine, who's the Global Chief Revenue Officer of Bloomberg Media Group, and Anush Prabhu, who is Partner, Chief Channel Planning and Investment Officer at Deutsch in New York. Todd Haskell, Senior Vice President, Chief Revenue Officer at Hearst Magazine's Digital Media, and Mac Delaney, Senior Vice President, Programmatic Solutions, Starcom MediaVest Group. Welcome to all. Okay. All righty. So we're going to do just sort of some jump ball here, questions not directed to anyone in particular at first. But looking back over the past year or so when this frenzy, which I think is the appropriate description, when this frenzy began, how has programmatic in general changed your business?
I can start. I think it's forced us to take a look at our tech stack and our data and really combine it into one centralized platform. I think in doing so, it's provided greater uses for it, programmatic being one of them. I think data-driven deals is another, and different types of partnerships. I think allowing us to really address the marketplace at a portfolio level just allows for a totally different conversation, and as a company, gives us a great opportunity to figure out how to make that scale addressable. Programmatic certainly being one way for the marketplace to be able to access that scale.
Anybody else? Paul, Bloomberg?
Yeah, well, I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think, first of all, it stretched our interest and our capabilities around our data stack. There's no question about it. It completely made us think a little bit more on the mature side of how we're going to structure the entire team and how we're going to come approach the market. But more importantly, it allowed us to even start to think beyond what the digital definition of what programmatic is. It allowed us to think, what are the applications of programmatic across all the different platforms? And we all know that how Time Inc. went ahead on the print side of it. We are starting to build that too, but also linear television, radio, all the different aspects.
And outdoor, by the way.
And outdoor.
They're all over it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I would just add is at the beginning, a couple of years ago, it just seemed like there was this mad rush that people just felt they had to be there, either on the client side or an agency sides, in terms of just, well, it's something we had to do. And I think now what's happened is there's a little bit more of an equilibrium that's been struck, which is how we as publishers working with agencies, working with tech providers, can ultimately just sort of balance everyone's needs to just drive towards better results, versus sort of arbitrary goals to say, okay, we want X amount of our business to be programmatic, and well, but why? But now I think that there's a little better understanding as to why it's worth it, what we should be trying to achieve.
That actually, I love that point, but because what you're really talking about is that we fall in love with styles of buying. We talk about native, we talk about programmatic. Really all this is just tactics in order to achieve the goal. So as opposed to compartmentalizing it, you have to think about it in its totality of just how you want to reach your audience across all the different styles of buying.
I think it is interesting you mentioned in terms of tactics of how you go about buying. Because if you think of programmatic, I think it's very much industry-specific view of looking at media. It's not a consumer-centric view necessarily, because from their perspective, it kind of doesn't make a difference. So I think the biggest change as an advertiser that it has brought in our agency at least is efficiency, but at the same time, it has brought about a different way of looking at staffing and people that we hire, right? Because we need people who understand the landscape a little bit more. And as we're talking programmatic, a lot of people don't differentiate between programmatic and data necessarily. They think it's one and the same, that being data-driven means buying programmatically. But it's not. It's an execution. It's a buying execution versus data can be attached to anything that we do today. But as we are looking at our buying functionalities, we are, at least at our agency, trying to kind of meld creativity into buying a lot more these days, because a lot more is possible. And programmatic has created these two worlds for us, where one way is a very standardized executional element looking for efficiencies. The other way is looking for the context and the right deals that kind of matter for our brands. And finding the right mix of both of those things have become very critical for us.
Mac, how do you view it?
Yeah, the fact that I'm from the buying side and been sort of an instigator of this programmatic shift for some years now, we've only known change. And I love your point that you just landed on there, because I think where we are today, as Chip was sharing just earlier, the hands-on operators of the programmatic practice, the audience on-demand practice and operation within Viviki is now within the SMG agencies. And so there's a realization now, I think, at this moment that the agency skill set is needing a sort of what I call a marketing's gene replacement therapy. It is a time where there is an army now to educate, and you can go about that in a very slow process, or you can be much more surgical and realize we have to bring in genes that have existed elsewhere from the sales side to infuse into this organization, so that we can build upon what the small groups of folks have brought in, the skill set, but also what the skill set allows you to do, the epiphanies and the point of views, the data-driven marketing sort of enables you to sort of understand there's still too much of a divide between the traditional account teams who are thinking about strategy and planning in the sort of version 1.0 format and these new programmatic thinkers.
Let's talk a little bit more about the skill sets, because I look at a Conde Nast and I don't necessarily think about science, technology, and data. I think about some of the world's most brilliant content. So what has that meant in terms of the people that you bring into your organization and the degree to which they can fuse with the existing talent?
I mean, I think over the past year, we've made huge strides to make sure, even from top down and bottom up. So if you think about leadership as a whole, they've done a great job of bringing in top talent that are digital minded, that are analytical. Fred Santarpia is the first ever chief digital officer for Conde Nast.
Talent.
They did not have a digital officer before then, to really make sure, to the point I made before, that we are doing things from a technology standpoint, from a data-driven standpoint, that can allow us to address the 81 million uniques we have at a portfolio level. But from a sales perspective, I think for us in this generation, things are changing rapidly every single day. So I think it's less about making sure someone has programmatic experience per se, and really just making sure that they obviously have a digital background, that they're technologically savvy, that they're analytical in thinking, but more importantly, that they're driven, that they understand the importance of staying dialed into the marketplace, understand how to adopt to all this change, and are constantly looking to learn and strive to better themselves to make sure that they can speak the language and they can understand what's happening in real time.
So Paul, you've been at Bloomberg Media for about a year now. And when you came in, I think your television, your radio, your print, your digital were sort of that classic siloed. So you did a lot of reorganizing structurally, and then also with talent. So from a programmatic standpoint, what did that mean to you in terms of talent? Did you go specifically looking for folks with that background, or was it more of a training and learning?
So to your point, what we did at Bloomberg is we reorganized our siloed sales teams into a multi-platform sales team. So all 110 sellers around the globe sell all the different platforms that Bloomberg has, which is every platform. So what we did when it came to the programmatic is certainly we thought about talent. We brought in talent. Having a chief digital officer is important. Our publisher of digital is Keith Grossman, and a leader and helped really on the for Wired, really brought them and led the industry in a lot of ways down the path. He then took that same learning here, applied it. We brought in new talent that understood how to use data. We created a data science team that had people from NASA-trained data scientists to come in and help us to create what we have in the terminal and what we knew about our audiences and put it across into the stack. And then we also brought in sales talent. In addition to the sales talent that we brought in with experience, we trained the entire global sales team on the product. And the entire global sales team is so-called certified in their ability to sell in programmatic and in every style of selling.
So it's full integration from
Full
a skill set
integration.
standpoint, not only across channels,
Yeah.
but across the knowledge base.
And it's an expectation that we have that every employee has the cross ability to sell across every aspect, especially programmatic.
Does that fit, Todd, for example, with what you've done at Hearst?
Probably a little different. I mean, we had to do a few things. I mean, first of all, but I completely agree with Paul, talent is everything in this space. So we started bringing in, a guy like Mike Smith, who literally wrote the book on programmatic. Plug for Mike's book if you don't already have it, called Targeted. Mike, you owe me one. But then what we also wanted to do is actually look bigger than just within Hearst Magazine. So we actually, Mike, along with our CTO, have been looking at unifying the ad tech stack across the entire Hearst Corporation. So our magazine properties, our television properties, our newspaper properties, and then we even looked at our service businesses. So you look at something like Core Audience, which previously was essentially a DMP within the iCrossing business. We reposition that now as sort of an audience and performance arm that services the entire corporation and puts some really great talent into that team, who then works with all of our sales teams across all of our business units to bringing best in-class solutions against this. So how can we use data from Jumpstart Automotive, one of the leading automotive platforms, and apply that data against really sophisticated programs that might live on Esquire.com and Elle.com, but also the San Francisco Chronicle? How do we just bring better solutions? And a critical piece of that is a group of people we call sales engineers. So these are, really smart, talented technologists, but who can work really closely with customers, understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, be partnered really closely with our sales team to make the process easier.
Mac, you've been at this for a little while, big champion of programmatic buying. What did that mean in terms of the people you hired, in terms of training, ongoing learning? How did you approach that?
It was interesting. On the VVK side, we liked to think of ourselves during that time as we were starting this marketplace, this agency trading desk marketplace.
And how many years ago was that?
That was 2008 is when that actually formally started and gained steam in 2009. So we like to think of ourselves as a hybrid model. We weren't full agency and we weren't full vendor. We were working in a new sort of model where we are licensing technology and building thin layers of ourselves by ourselves. And so it required us to, if our client base was all of our colleagues within the Publicis group, to not hire traditional sales people. Otherwise, the dialogue, the trust, it would just shut down. It would never really foster open dialogue and make progress. So we had to find this sort of unicorn salesperson, part engineer, part sort of disarming advocate and evangelist, and it was very challenging. But that was the early stage, and so you had the first folks that dipped their toes in, people who raised their hand and realized this is the future, this infrastructure that needs to be laid out, and this is personally how I want to advance my career, understanding this first. Today, those people still exist. Many of them have moved on because they were early. And so you have still a generation of folks that grew up believing that they live to serve the client. And the agency business and how we make money, if we make money, is maybe second, maybe far second. And that is the challenge. Who is there today, and how do we infuse that with individuals who can teach these individuals that how you grew up isn't totally obsolete, but put your business hat on. Look at the marketplace and look at what Hearst is doing with sales engineers. Everyone's DNA is changing, and you have to change as well. It's an interesting time because talent costs money, and I'm on the agency side.
Got it. Speaking of money, to either one of our agency representatives, how would you advise publishers on their pricing strategies? They obviously have a lot of opportunities for guaranteed and preferred deals and private auctions and open exchanges. From the buy side, any advice for publishers on how they should be approaching you from a pricing standpoint?
I'm convinced that the future success of what we do today, how we work together, how we do business, is based on collaboration. And so the idea that we can sit down and leave behind the dynamic of old as much as we can of there's going to be a winner here and there's going to be a loser, and it's all going to be about negotiation. We are now going to be working, we are beginning now, in a world where our systems are literally integrating and our data is being shared, and there has to be an enormous amount of trust and reassurance around that in order for this to work. And so I love the fact that you could bring someone as knowledgeable to the table as a sales engineer who could match up with, hopefully on the agency side, an individual who could be that bookend and start to architect this. But I think it's going to be about taking steps together. I come from a publishing background, and so I have a heightened sensitivity to yield and yield management and the things that keep publishers up at night. And it's been interesting being on the agency side for 5 years. And that point of view, those worries, that doesn't exist. And I think we need some common understanding. And I think the people who will advance fastest are the ones that come to the table and create deal terms that guarantee spend, that infuse data, that lock pipes in, so that they can come out first.
Anush, do you have some thoughts?
Sure, I agree with Mac in general, but from a agency side that also kind of handles brands, I would say that we got to think about the brand you represent and what you want to grow from a value perspective as the brand itself, right? Because at the end of the day, we have these multiple marketplaces now where publishers are almost disappearing in our presentations, right? So we are talking about audiences, we are talking about what we're going to buy, and many a times in this equation where there are these two sides where we need a lot more context playing, we need champions of context. So to me, pricing context from a different perspective is where brands need to also kind of think about, because otherwise you're leading into a competitive landscape where you'll be kind of obsolete in many ways in terms of pricing.
I think I want to pick up on the level because I have a couple of questions associated with that. But I do have a question though on the sell side on the pricing of the inventory and the allocation of the inventory. How do you all from the publisher's side figure out how much inventory to allocate to all of these different buying opportunities?
So price is a really interesting point because price is relative, and if you look across any one brand or any of the portfolio of brands, there's a different CPM attached to all of them across in all of the companies. And I've worked in a number of publishing companies at this point, and they're all different. It comes down to value. What kind of value you're trying to drive? And so when we think about that, it's a combination of three things. One is we have to establish first what results can we achieve by that particular buy, and that's informed based on the quality of the product coming in and the value of the results coming out. The second thing is that we have to allocate the right media to it. And there is a balance of what we're allocating to and from, but the reality is we're as interested in putting our premium inventory in as we are our non-premium inventory, because once again, it's about building the package. It's sitting down with our partners and building the right package that's going to get the right results. And the third thing is the aim towards what the KPI is. There are definitely certain situations where programmatic is going to deliver a better KPI than not using programmatic. And so we may put in our most valuable inventory in there in order to get the greatest return for our clients. Once again, confirming what Mac's talking about, is all about the sit down first, figure out what is it that they want to achieve, and coming to a mutual decision, not a tension negotiation, a mutual decision of value.
So your approach is hardly scientific. There are a lot of factors that go into that allocation and the pricing decision. So it doesn't sound to me like you're talking about any kind of a formula.
So there's two sides to this whole thing. The first side is from a premium publisher standpoint, it's going to be, there's definitely an intelligent thought that's got to go into this entire equation. When you look at the other side of programmatic, which is just scale buying across multiple publishers, that's, full disclosure, I'm also on the board of Tremor, which is, is a video programmatic solution. That's the other side of it, where they aggregate many publishers together and have a different type of conversation. So it just depends on which side of it is. So it goes back to the original point, which is programmatic is a style of buying. There are many ways to buy through programmatic sources. How you establish pricing and value depends on all the different components.
Todd, is your approach customized as well in that sense, the way that Paul was talking about?
Yes and no. I mean, essentially, the approach that we take is one that all of the different programmatic sort of methodologies should compete with one another and should compete sort of on an open basis. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, what we're most focused on is how are we going to achieve the best possible results, as Paul said, for the customer, but how are we going to be able to optimize our own yield? So generally the idea of sort of segmenting the inventory into, well, this much for this channel, this much for that channel, generally we don't do it because we want, in many cases, we're going to have people who are going to do, a programmatic direct relationship with us that are paying rates that would put them superior to that of some direct client. So we want everybody to be competing against one another, including our direct salespeople. I mean, we treat everybody on an equal playing field, ultimately, like I said, to drive the best results and to drive the best possible yield for ourselves.
Let me just add to it, because it's interesting talking about results and pricing, right? If I think about as a data guy growing up to be the media person, I've seen that the best results are driven by the right balance of rational and emotional elements, right?
Well, you don't hear that very much from agencies anymore.
Especially from the data guy.
I love that.
Especially from the data guy. I will say this, that it's about possibilities to me, because programmatic and the way the world is going is like, all right, you're going to get the right place, right person, right time, and hopefully we'll talk about the right messages and stuff like that. But the best results are also driven by being unpredictable, by adding an element of surprise. So what we can do with that space creatively becomes a huge point for us as advertisers, for us that think about the brand. And that going into a pricing strategy, to me, is the interesting place, because that's where your brand stands apart. That's where you can kind of charge the flexibility and elasticity in pricing.
Mac, do you feel that way?
It's.
And you've been on the sell side, so.
Yes. And when this all started, there was panic around the brand value of this. Yeah, this content is gone, right? Do we even need a sales force anymore? The reality is what's always been left out of this conversation, which will come screaming as soon as we settle this, as soon as the technology settles and things standardize, the absolute need to create experiences for publishers to work in combination far closer than they are today with creative agencies, bringing what they know of their users and what the marketer knows of their customers and prospective customers. It is the hardest. This is complicated. This is really hard. It is far easier to do this than it is going to be to tackle how do you capture someone's attention and create emotional reaction between their ears. And so it's I don't lose sleep, even from a publishing background, that the value of the inventory as we move from people to really placement is going away. I think the publishers that will lead will be the ones that are going to try to help solve that bigger, much bigger challenge first.
We do like to complicate the complicated, though, don't we?
We can't get enough
Love
viewability?
that.
Sure. Let's not hold anybody to it but ourselves.
Right.
I love it.
And just to add to the complexity, I feel like it's more complex given that the world is disintegrated, where we are looking at media separately from the creative solutions, right? So it becomes harder because there are these two separate paths going around, right? How do you bring them together in a space which gets even more complex in terms of buying, in terms of how we do?
Yeah, there's an increasing amount of conversation about bringing creative and media back together again.
Yeah.
That has resurfaced recently, and very, very strong opinions.
Which we like at Deutsche.
But very strong opinions on all sides, so kind of interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about making money. Every time we add a new technology, new opportunity into the stack, it's got to come out of somewhere. It comes out of either the publisher side or somewhere on the agency and client side. So how do you all think about that? I think you've seen all of the diagrams and the charts and all that about who's taking what out of the stack. Are we hurting ourselves by making this more complicated? Are we going to get any kind of pricing relief given all of the technologies? And it's not stopping. It's not stopping. If you look at the combination of the volume and velocity of change and innovation, and either one by itself, the volume or the velocity, is stunning in terms of its impact on all of us. But the combination of those two, the volume plus the velocity of change, it makes everybody's head spin. And there are a lot of people taking money out of what used to be the publisher's pocket or which was the agency's pocket. So is this just going to go on endlessly until there's not so much left?
I hope not. That would be a disaster.
Yeah.
I've seen the evolution of the publishing P&L quite significantly change.
That's good.
Over the last number of years,
Yep.
and there used to be a very somewhat predictable nature of the publishing P&L of how you can put it together and what the expectations are. And now it's a much more fluid creation. There's no question that the shifts on the revenue and the cost side brought on by such aggressive type of purchasing and selling like programmatic and other solutions too. The stress of the P&L on custom content, the stress of the P&L on audience, sophisticated audience targeting, all these things, social layering, every aspect of it changed and augmented the P&L. Our goal as a publisher is obviously we have to maximize that P&L. So we're going to have to move from one to the other, which is why you hear talk about people saying, well, maybe we don't need a sales force anymore. Maybe we just do it all this way as a way to relieve some sort of P&L pressure. The reality is there has to be give and take. There's a balance to it. We've all been able to creatively come to the right answers, and I think that's just the nature of it. The only difference is the speed of change has never been greater. Mm-hmm. So things that we can no longer even set up a P&L for a year, it has to be adjusted almost in real time.
Well, I think I see this a lot in organizational structure, in organizational design. It used to be that you could set something up, for 5 or 10 years. Now, many companies go through restructuring as just part of the way that they do business. So I think it's having a huge effect on.
No, okay, we look at it all the time. We're in a constant state of flow. We're not changing. It's a constant evolution. But I think the ones who win are the ones who adapt the fastest. So if you wait for magical moments to make changes on your P&L or your structure or anything, those magical moments don't ever happen then. It's got to be an everyday, every moment experience.
I think the other way to think about it is, first of all, what can we as publishers, as agencies, do more to add value to what it is that a customer is going to be buying, and so that hopefully we can add value which comes at a premium that can help us all protect our margin. So whether, as Paul said, whether that's around content and creation and strategy, whether that's around data or what have you, we all need to be thinking about that all the time. But there's also these, every 6 months there seems to be another ad tech expectation of, okay, you're going to need to carry one of these 4 providers or this or whatever. And I think, one of the things, we look at this either sometimes on our own proactively or sometimes at the behest of customers. And a lot of them say, okay, well, here's what it is, and here's our piece of the action that we're going to take on every one of these. I can tell you that from Hearst's perspective, we work with Salesforce. Salesforce doesn't say, we're going to take a piece of the action on every sale you make because you run on our software.
Right.
increasingly these ad tech companies are going to have to shift to a SaaS model, because where we're going to have a fixed cost of what it is we know we're going to do, that they're not, as we scale up, that they take more money from us. We just fundamentally have a problem with that. So I think we are increasingly leaning towards SaaS type products so that we can protect our margin.
And I think we're certainly seeing that across the ad tech landscape.
Yeah.
If not for the right reasons, the valuations are obviously much higher on the SaaS companies, but I think we're definitely seeing that move. Mac, I have a question for you. What do you think is the future of the agency trading desks in this whole scenario?
Yeah, it's there was always multiple iterations. So there wasn't one template that the holding companies used, and that became clear as again Chip mentioned. Xaxis maybe last year said we were never a trading desk. Think of us more like an ad network, which I think was
interesting.
That was very interesting. The story of advertising, whether it's Mad Men and Harry coming in the office one day and pitching, hey, we need to have our own TV division,
Right.
to digital, to search. The agency model is a services model. It's a services business. So as channels emerge, agencies historically have learned how to, on behalf and for their clients, become experts in delivering that service. What was different about this programmatic piece, I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet, but for some reason, if you follow TV, you follow digital, you follow search, all of a sudden the agencies couldn't do that. You can't do that. The agency trading desk model it's just wrong, or it's in a conflict of interest, which was interesting to me. I think we've moved away from that whole conflict, and now it's about, can I do it myself as a client?
Right.
Should I work in partnership with a third party, or can I trust that this agency is now, weaved in that DNA, and you can do it as well as the technology provider or better? One of the asks that I would have of the publishing community is, anytime you talk to a client, please ask them to encourage their agencies to buy technology, to settle on a shorter amount of partners. I know of no publisher that says I'd rather work with 24 ad networks and SSPs versus an agency that has one or two pipes and they've figured out how to make this all make sense and it's fluid. And so I think we have shared goals at this moment and will be for some time.
I don't know anyone who wouldn't be in favor of that. Maybe with the exception of a couple of the ad tech companies themselves, but I think for all of us it makes a lot of sense. Anush, do you have a comment on trading desks and where they're
I kind of
going?
agree with him. We don't, at Deutsche, we don't have a trading desk. We actually do have partners that we go out with. It's just the nature of the business that most of the brands we handle through. The balance between what we do from an objective perspective doesn't warrant us that kind of...
The one piece I guess I'd left out was the fact that this is truly unique. There isn't one platform. There isn't just Google for search in programmatic. You've got multiple technologies that can all stand on their own: pure play mobile, pure play video, social PMDs, and a ton of display and now multi-channel DSPs, as well as data management platforms that we're being asked to drive. How do you become great at that at scale overnight? You don't. You always start within a small group, and that was the agency trading desk model. Now we've picked that group and placed them physically within the agencies, but they're still one group. They need to be for some time to come. And so it's going to take time before each account team can do this, and it will take much more consolidation. And I think as clients try to dabble in this themselves, they realize, wow, this is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more people needed. Hard to find skill sets, and then when we train them up, they're highly marketable. Yeah. And
I'll add to that, saying that to me that is if you're thinking about an investment to make, the DMPs are the place to go, because to me the data is the kind of investment you want to make, because that is going to be the integration element across multiple channels. And today the amount of data that's available and how you utilize each publisher, each partner out there, to the best of its ability, going back to the conversation on the pricing, as we are thinking about spending monies, there is a balance between, again, it's the old school direct and CRM aspect of the puzzle, which is as a test and learn aspect, where you got to figure out how much you want to pay for how much impact, right? The promise of more data, more precision is that it's going to give you a better impact. And the question you got to ask is it? And if you have the intelligence to drive that impact, not just in one channel, but to spread it across multiple channels as you're reaching your audience, that kind of minimizes the burden of the investment you're making in technology. So to me, DMP is data. That's where brands should invest in. That's where a lot more agencies should be spending their money in.
Leslie, how do you, in this environment where audience buying is the discussion and the approach versus buying brand by brand, how do you keep the Conde Nast brands front and center with agency and client decision makers?
So I think the big change that we've made this year is we introduced to the marketplace a new notion around premium at scale. And I think it's kind of an oxymoron to say, but as a legacy print company, I think we're at a distinct advantage than some of the digital first companies because of the sheer amount of data that we're sitting on. We have such insight around our audience. We've been in people's homes, so we have names and addresses. So the digital footprint that we have to leverage from a data standpoint, I think gives us a great advantage because not only do we have tremendous storytelling capabilities and content from a premium standpoint, but then we also have really deep insights and understanding from an audience standpoint. So I think we can almost play a dual role from the standpoint of being able to offer up solutions that are very much content-driven, premium in nature. You sit down, you have the conversation, you understand the key objectives, but then you can allow your insight to inform your partners in terms of the strategies they're taking from a content standpoint. So we really can offer them audience, insight, data, and of course the content. And then we're also trying to figure out different ways to reinvent ourselves, and premium partners outside of our own ecosystem are really recognizing us for the premium nature of our content. We're doing really different partnerships around with Snapchat and Spotify and Apple even of the world. So we really are trying to diversify also our business and where our content lives at the same time.
So we have about a minute left, so we'll do a quick lightning round. Biggest challenge ahead for the rest of 2015 and 2016 as it relates to all of the opportunities that we all have. What do you think is going to be the toughest challenge for each of you?
I'll go first. People. I think it always comes down to people. And in my world, people is directly related, it has been and will be unless there's some serious change to compensation. And so it'll be very interesting to see how fast our model can evolve given where we're rooted from.
Great.
For us, I think, right now it still very much is kind of a race to the bottom in terms of rates. And for us, we feel as a premium publisher, that's definitely not going to help us move the needle. So our hope is that it's going to shift a little bit.
Great.
I agree with Mac. People is the biggest challenge. Interestingly enough, from our perspective, sales talent is not a problem. We can get great salespeople. We do it all the time. The challenge is actually the people, the doers. It's operations people, project management, campaign management. They make a huge difference in customer satisfaction. They're highly in demand. It is a real challenge for us to get and retain those people. So it's something we're very focused on, how to develop those people's careers so they feel fulfilled and want to stay with us longer.
I think people is definitely a good one, not only in terms of getting the right people, but also structuring them within your organization so that there is this infection of data and understanding. But I think one of the bigger problems I see is focus. Focus from what brands need to accomplish, the right metrics, and how we do that for our brands and as advertisers, because we live in a world today where the metrics have changed. We got to look at people as media as well. We're looking for people that kind of share, create ownable and shareable work is some of the things that we speak about internally. Because how do you kind of look at remarkability? Is your media and content that we are producing being shared, are they remarkable enough so that you're getting more bang for the buck? Those are things that are a threat if you start looking at the nuances within how you're buying rather than what you're trying to accomplish for these brands. And that's something that I would say that we as an agency want to focus on is focus.
Good one. Last word.
Last word. I say that,
you're all wrong.
You're
brilliant.
What are you talking about, people? No, they're absolutely all correct. But I actually think more than the challenge, I get excited. I've never been more excited about our industry than I am right now. I think we're in this incredible opportunity for change and evolution. I think all of the things that we're working on right now across all these different styles of buying, but programmatic is one of the most exciting ones. I think it's opening up a world of opportunity for every type of publisher, for every type of advertiser to ultimately tell their story. So I see the challenges, but actually I'm overwhelmed by the excitement.
Fantastic. What do you all think? We have time for just a couple of questions. Nobody's thinking.
They're overwhelmed by the excitement.
They're overwhelmed by the excitement. So good. All set. All right. Well, thank you all very much. It was a fantastic conversation. I'm excited too. I see a lot of creativity and great opportunity. So thank you.